Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for this special series of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. I'm your host, Ashley Kopovich, Director of Partnerships at Crexi, and this is the Women of Influence series, delivering the next level insights and expertise live from GlobeSt's Multifamily Fall 2024 event. Today, we're thrilled to sit down with Natalie Greenberg, COO of MJW Investments. A little bit about our guest. As Chief Operating Officer, Natalie plays a direct role in formulating and executing the company's strategy and oversees its acquisitions, asset management, marketing, investor relations, human resources, and capital markets activities. Prior to joining MJW Investments, Natalie served as Senior Vice President at Entrada Partners, where she was responsible for all acquisitions, financing, and depositions. During her 4-year tenure, Entrada's portfolio size nearly tripled. Before Entrada, Natalie was a director in the acquisitions team at Rexford Industrial Realty, where she completed 15 acquisitions and was responsible for all asset dispositions. She also held the position of Senior Asset Manager at Colony Capital and worked in Wells Fargo's REO Group. In each of these roles, she managed nationwide portfolios comprised of over 100 commercial real estate owned assets and non-performing loans across all property types. Currently, Natalie is president of the UCLA Real Estate Alumni Group. She is also an active member of the Urban Land Institute, where she sits on the Multifamily Council. She is affiliated with several philanthropic organizations, including the Israel Democracy Institute. Natalie received a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Barnard College at Columbia University and a Master's in Business Administration from UCLA Anderson School of Management. Natalie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I don't think I've ever had someone read that out loud. So
it is lovely and very, very impressive. So we're really excited to sit down with you today.
Excited to be here.
Good. I know we just covered your background, but give us a little bit of your history and overview, how you got started in commercial real estate.
Well, I got started in commercial real estate because my parents were immigrants and they didn't have very good English, and every time we rented apartments in New York when I was growing up, or when they needed their first lease for their store because they had clothing stores, I was literally doing that with them and for them. Even at the age of like 12 and 13, I had the better grammar. To this day, I still write anything they need in English for them, but it comes par for the course of being an immigrant. So I think just from a very early age, I got connected to real estate. It's very tangible. And so after I graduated college, I went into investment banking because I figured they'll pay me to learn finance. And so I did that for 2 years. And the most sort of logical group for me was the real estate group. And I was fortunate enough to get placed in there. And that has literally been my career from day one of graduation.
I love that. So from a young age, it was sort of thrust upon you, and then here you are now.
Yes.
Good. So tell us a little bit about getting into commercial real estate. Anything you learned really early on that sort of shaped your success in your career to here?
It's interesting. So when I got into real estate, so that was, like 2003 when I was in investment banking in New York, I still remember that there was a sofa in the women's restroom, and that was the cry sofa. So whenever someone got yelled at so much, they just went and cried. And because you had to just suck it up and take it. And I remember talking to my male colleagues and be like, is your cry sofa comfortable? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we don't have a sofa in our bathroom. And they're like, nobody cries. And I was like, oh, okay, tough it up, Natalie, tough it up. And it was just the most male-dominated environment. It was so challenging. And fast forward to today, everything is still in need of improvement, but it is so much better, right? Like, I've worked at several organizations where I now have the ability to make sure that nobody needs a cry sofa, right? I'm in a position of leadership where I can actively seek out female leaders to make sure that we are a balanced organization. And I have to say, we're a corporate team of 10, and of that 10, we have 4 females, and that feels really good, right? And myself and one other female are in the executive leadership team there. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You did, and so well. I mean, I think that especially in sales, especially in commercial real estate, it is very male dominant, right? This is the Women of Influence series. So I would love to talk a little bit more about that. What advice would you give to maybe young women or women in general trying to navigate through this industry?
You know, there are kind of two schools of thought, and depending on the situation, I kind of would play on one versus the other. Some people say, walk into a room and don't have a gender, right? Just be you. Don't use your femininity in any ways, your soft side, you know. And other situations, and this is sort of the way that I have chosen to play it, is use everything you have to your advantage, right? It's very hard for me, and it's probably my greatest strength and my greatest weakness, to separate things. Like who I am as an individual, what I believe in as a person, translates into what I do every day in business. I can't treat one friend one way and one colleague another. I'm very kind of consistent with that. And part of that is I care for individuals. I feel certain ways that we should or shouldn't do business, and I bring that into the company. And so when I'm in a group of people and they're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter, we can just do this, I will bring up things that they're like, you're being too soft. And I'm like, am I being too soft, or am I thinking about a long-term relationship here with this potential seller where they could potentially sell us another deal if we choose going this path versus that path, right? And so if I were thinking of myself as just, you know, one of the guys, I would push aside all those emotions. But when I actually realize what my inside person is saying to me, that inside person is saying, think about these things and vocalize them. One thing I will say is that women apologize too much all the time, and women tend to have imposter complex. When I was at a conference not that long ago, I led like a little women's panel thing, and one of the women said, can we talk about imposter complex? And so we kind of spent a little bit of time doing that. After the session, I went over to my team and I was like, oh, it was really great. We you know, kind of addressed how to get over imposter complex. I was talking to 3 men. They all said, what is that? They're not even familiar with it, right? So as a woman, I think the advice I would give is have confidence in who you are. I say this to my 9-year-old daughter. If you have a question in the classroom, I promise you somebody else has that question. So don't be embarrassed to ask that question. Now, do you do it in the middle of a board meeting where you've been privileged just to have a seat just to sit there and listen? Not always, right? There's a time and a place for when to ask, and so you can learn the right way. But don't be afraid, and your voice does matter.
Oh, that was so lovely. That was just so rejuvenating to hear. A lot of good things in there. Was there a specific mentor throughout your career that sort of helped shape some of these ideals that you have? Give us a little insight into mentors of your life.
So when I went to UCLA Business School, it's called the Ziman Center for Real Estate, and I was just so fortunate to actually form a direct relationship with Richard Ziman. He's the reason I actually went afterwards to work for Rexford, and he kind of called me up and said, hey, there's an opening and this is interesting and come do it. And so I don't have that story of this wonderful female advocate, but I have Richard, who has been someone who still picks up my call to this day. He has been such an advocate for me whenever I'm at a crossroads and I need genuine advice. I call him and he gives it to me. Now, there are obviously other people in my life that I've leaned on, and I would say the best mentors that I've been able to seek out are ones that are not necessarily in your company, so they can give you more impartial advice. Another one of my mentors is someone who I worked with at Low Enterprises for years, and actually just helped me through something not that long ago, and was honestly on the phone with me every day for a week as I worked through it. And I hadn't talked to him in 6-7 months. You know, these are people you can always kind of call on. They're the friends that you don't have to have every day in your text message dialogue, but they're people you can call on. And the good thing about the right mentor is they're going to be honest. And you have to understand that when you talk to a mentor and it's the right mentor, you might not like what they have to say. Right? They might say to you, hey, that business environment you're in might not be the right place for you, or that job function you're in might not be the best use of your skill set. And you have to be willing to accept that information, question it, work through it, but accept the information, because if it's a true mentor, they're not going at it for anything for themselves. They're not getting anything out of it, right? If you don't work in the same company, sometimes you don't even work in the same industry. Listen to what they have to say and internalize what they're saying and try to learn from it.
Yes, that is so important. A lot of different things right there. Is just, if you want to get those answers, be prepared to listen to it, right? I absolutely love that. So shifting gears a little bit, we're at the Multifamily Conference. So of course, I need to ask you a couple of questions about this. What trends are you currently seeing in the multifamily or in the commercial real estate market? And how do you think that that's going to impact the industry in the short term, long term?
So just for way of context, MJW is student housing and multifamily focused shop. We've got about $1.5 billion under management. Of that, it's about 3,000 units and about 7,000 beds. And on our student housing side, we're kind of nationwide. On the multifamily side, we're a lot of Pacific Northwest, California, and then some in Atlanta. So just for perspective of, where we're coming from. We have been actively looking over the past, year and a half to understand where should we be, what should we be buying. And I think what we've learned from both the trends of what we're seeing in the market and also what our investor base wants. So we don't have a fund. We're not publicly owned. Mark Weinstein founded this company 35 years ago by himself and built it from the ground up. And our benefit is that we can control all of our own decisions. And so what we want for our investments might be different than if you're talking to, Noah Hockman at True America or somebody else who's got sort of a different investment agenda. But for us, we want reliable, predictable cash flows for our investors, because that's what they're seeking. And they don't want to do it in tertiary markets. They want to do it in primary, secondary markets. And so the trends that we've been seeing there is just a lot of pricing discovery right now, because honestly, there haven't been that many transactions. Financing has gotten prohibitively expensive. Loan to value ratios when you're closing a deal have come from what used to be a comfortable 60-65% to 50-55%. And us as an organization, we've really shifted from buying older product to buying newer products. So whereas 4 or 5 years ago, we would have been comfortable buying a 1970s deal because it's got a deep value add story, today we are more likely to buy a 1990s, 2000s and newer product because we don't want the surprises of what's going to come with that older product. The nice area for us is we can play in this area of we'll buy a $10 million deal or we'll buy a $50 million deal, so we can basically be where institutions are not because of the smaller deal. We've recently entered the Boise market. It's a market that we feel very strongly about. And as a general strategy, we're shifting a little bit from blue states to red states because we think the regulatory environment has created a lot of disruption in our ability to run our assets efficiently.
Really, really good insights. Appreciate you sharing that. Now, moving into some of the technology that's coming out in commercial real estate, how do you see that being used? What are you most excited about in terms of tech innovation?
I am most excited for large organizations that have tens of millions of dollars to invest in technology to figure out the 2 or 3 platforms that a company like ours should implement. So, because we're just too small of an organization to start piloting these big things. But I will say on the investor relations side, we have transitioned to Juniper Square, which is an investor relations platform that manages all of our investor relations communication from offering memorandum all the way through K1 distributions. And as they're adapting and creating new technologies, we're on that ride with them. We've sort of doubled down using Yardi. What we've noticed is that there's a new technology popping up every day, and a lot of them are offering to do sort of the same things. And by doing one chat function with this organization and one delinquency collection, AI with this organization, it becomes very challenging for our property management and operations team to oversee all the different platforms. We've come into a situation where they've got like 8 different logins, right? And all just to manage one thing in an asset. So what we're actually trying to do, and our director of operations has been instrumental in implementing this, is kind of bringing everything under one roof, so that even if it's not the perfect solution for the technology, it's all in one place for our managers. And Noah Hockman was just, I don't know why, he's brought him up twice today. Noah just talked about on his panel where they're actually forcing, so True America doesn't have their own property management, but they're actually forcing every single PM company that they work with to sit under their technology and their umbrella. And that's how they're able to kind of manage things. So in a similar way, we're trying to the best that we can on our scale to synthesize things within our organization as well.
Sure. Consolidation is key.
Yes.
Right. Of course. Now, I know that you don't have a crystal ball, but what would your predictions be for the multifamily space and the commercial real estate space potentially as a whole over the next year, 2025 and beyond?
So everyone used to say kind of, survive till 25. And now I said it like a while ago. I was like in the mix till 26. Like we have to take it another year. I don't think we're going to see the level of distress fully come out yet. I think multifamily is in a unique position because office is just tanked, right? Like there's too much office space in several markets. There has to be a complete reset of rents. Owners are just handing assets back. Institutional partners aren't even questioning it. They're like, oh yeah, you own in this market, the rents have dropped so far, here you go. In the multi-space, we're kind of in this midpoint where some assets are not worth, anywhere near what you paid for them 2 years ago. Maybe there's a 30% drop in the value of that asset, but that asset is still worth at least the loan amount. And so ownership doesn't want to walk away from it. And so they're going to have to put capital into it in order to see that brighter day. And it's really going to be a question of have and have nots with having the money to wait for multifamily to kind of come back. Because I think right now people are only buying core investments. They're only buying the new product. They're only buying the brand new lease up because it feels like the safest thing. That deep value add asset that everyone was buying in 21 to 23, no one's touching it today, but a lot of people own it. So I think what we're going to see is a lot of people putting in capital into their assets and kind of holding onto their assets for honestly 2 to 3 years longer than their business plan so that they can wait for rates to come down, cap rates to adjust, and so that they can exit their asset without having a loss to their investors. Mm-hmm. So not totally bright future, but not doom and gloom.
Not doom and gloom, that is for sure. Appreciate that dose of positivity for us. So a lot of insight, a lot of advice that you've already given. I love that your company has 4 out of 10 women leaders. Before we let you go here, any advice to any of our listeners, whether that be people that want to get into commercial real estate, women, companies, to bring up that leadership of women, anything in general? And I know that's a bit to narrow down, so take a minute if you'd like to, but I'm sure our listeners would love to hear it.
I think if anyone wants to get into commercial real estate, there are so many different avenues of getting into it, and they should just look at who's the most active and go. Sometimes people are like, no, I only want to be on the buyer side. I only want to work in private equity. But I actually think that if you work in brokerage for a couple of years, you see so many transactions and you get exposed to potentially different types of deals, different types of products, different clients, so that after 2-3 years in investment banking, which is effectively another form of brokerage, or in a brokerage shop like an Eastil or a CBRE, one of those groups, you come out of that with some significant training. So for people who want to be in real estate, I would say, to the extent that you can, go into a shop that has a training program. Go into a shop that's willing to invest the time in you, because at that entry level, everyone's all the same. It's as you sort of get to those senior levels where you see a lot of women drop off. But if you have that good foundational base, I'm hoping that we'll see fewer women drop off, as they get to more senior roles.
Absolutely. I love that. Training and education is key. As you mentioned earlier, listen to the things that maybe you don't want to hear, right? And just keep going. So that was amazing. Where can our listeners reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Happy to, if you just kind of message me and mention that you kind of heard our podcast and wanted to reach out, I'm always happy to. You know, I've been a mentor to anyone who needs a mentor. Probably not as active as I was when I didn't have a family, but I now find mentors for people. If someone reaches out to me and I'm like, okay, you're in the really early stages of your career, let me connect you with somebody else who's maybe 5-6 years out of your career. That is one piece of advice I'd say when you're looking for a mentor. Don't try to go with someone who's a year older than you, and don't try to go with someone who's 30 years older than you. Find someone who's 2 to 3 steps ahead of you to get that guidance, and then maybe also find one person who's 10 to 15 years ahead of you and get that perspective. But if you go for someone who's so far out from where you are, it's hard to create that relatability still. But anyone can always reach out to me. I promise I will respond, and if not me, then I'll find someone who can help you.
That's wonderful. Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. We know that you're very, very busy, so enjoy the rest of your show, and thank you again.
Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. And thanks to all of you who tuned in. If you enjoyed this episode, do not miss the next one. Visit Crexi.com/podcast and sign up to get the next episode delivered straight to your inbox. Of course, you can also subscribe to the Crexi Podcast on your favorite podcast app and check out our YouTube channel for video recordings of each episode. Take care and be sure to tune in next time.